an estimated over 200 million people that will see this film
Mm-hmm.
in a very novel way of putting the film together,
Mm-hmm.
two producers. It's our journey through a country. We come to look at what hunger is, what does the world need to know.
I was coming from North Korea. Then we stopped in a Russian town known as Irkutsk. They said it was autumn, that it was not winter yet, but it was -2. So I really pitied those people.
-2 in Irkutsk, it's very warm.
They said it was autumn. It was,
Autumn, yeah.
it was November, not yet.
Okay.
Mr. President, our joint team came to Uganda, indeed to Africa, to look at the future of the African people and specifically to look at hunger. And we have found that hunger is much more than we originally thought it was. It is many things dealing with opportunity and in many formats. Can you address this issue for us and tell us what the world can expect in the future?
As far as Africa is concerned?
Yes. In dealing with hunger and the concept of hunger in Africa, perhaps you could expand a little bit on what hunger is and what is being done about it.
Hunger in Africa, in much of Africa, is not as a result of shortage of natural resources. We've got plenty of natural resources in many of these areas. Even those which emerged sometimes would subside. So now, because of not having centralized states, organization was not so well organized to last century, after the Congress of Berlin. Then the colonial powers further distorted the economy towards their own interests. For instance, a country like Uganda has been depending on coffee. Now, as you know, coffee is not a food. People don't eat coffee. It's a beverage. But it's not something that you can eat. It's not a food. It's a beverage, all right, but it's not a food. You therefore found that there was more distortion. People, instead of producing food.
A lot of this then was in response to the European influence,
yes.
wanting things out of Africa,
Yes,
not so
yes,
concerned
yes,
about
yes,
Africa
yes,
itself.
Yes, precisely.
Okay. So this then comes into play.
In search of raw materials.
Yes.
Cheap raw materials.
Yes.
Now, that would not be a problem if the Europeans were paying high prices for this. That would not be a problem. If I produce coffee and I got a very good price, so that I could use it to do other things, then that would not be a problem. After all, that's how, for instance, the oil producing countries, although they produce one commodity, oil.
This is, in a word, it's exploitation.
Yes.
I mean, in every sense of the word.
Yes. This is a very major factor. When you are talking of hunger in Africa, talking of backwardness, it is in very many ways a direct consequence of the penetration of Africa by European powers.
Okay, so we
penetration first in the form of slave trade, and then eventually colonial, direct colonial control. Then the slave trade had another factor, the depopulation of the continent. Because you see, the continent is not as populated as, for instance, other continents. If you look at some of these countries, like Angola, for instance, it's a very huge country, but with a very small population. Zambia, very huge country, with a very small population. All these countries, in fact, the population is found here in the center of the continent and also in West Africa. That's why you find some sort of heavy population. And even this is recent. This population, the one which is recent, a country like Uganda should be having an optimal population of something like 60 million people.
60?
Yes. That will.
Here,
That,
tape change, sir.
that,
Just for 1 second.
Mm.
The wind is picked up. Excuse me.
products or into services.
Well, what then, in a word, do you need from other countries?
Now, before I come to that question, I need also to point out that after the withdrawal of colonial powers,
Well, it was sort of a summary of, given all of this, what is it you need from other nations?
well, first, what we need most is, first thing we need is no interference from outside countries. This is very, very crucial. No interference. Because this interference is the one which has caused most of the problems, according to what I have been telling you. And that's why we are glad, for instance, this collaboration between directly reflected here in Africa. You see, some Africans were for the French, some were for the British, some were for the Americans, some were for the Russians, and there were no Africans for Africa. No Africans for Africa. This was so bad that when we came into government, I tackled this problem. I mentioned it. Before this detoned, I pointed it out. Do you think, I asked these people, even the most backward animal, amoeba, knows its interests? Amoeba is a unicellular animal. It doesn't have 2 or 3 cells, just one cell. But it knows where food is. It knows where danger is. It knows where safety is, although it is so primordial. Why then do you imagine that we don't know our interests? So help here will help us solve our problems. So the first thing we need is no interference from outside. Not using these African countries as proxies in other people's games. That will be able to help us to first of all collaborate among ourselves within Africa here. Do trade among ourselves.
Question before it slips my mind here. You've been dealing with some of the factors of aid. What are some of the attitudes other countries have to have towards Africa as far as with regards to how aid is given? See? So what are some of the attitudes that other countries have to have? We talk about soft credits. We talk about trade. These are something that's measurable in a way. But when you say that just a few years ago, you gave a speech in the United Nations talking about this, we're judging an African country by whose side they're on. I mean, which is, again, this is a prevalent attitude today. Whose side are you on? And if you're on our side, well, then you're good, as opposed to any respect that's given. It's a word that keeps coming back to me, is respect. So I'm saying, even before we start talking soft credits, what kind of attitudes need to be taken other countries towards Africa?
Well, I think the most important attitude would be non-interference, non-manipulation. You see, because aid can be used to manipulate countries. Conditional aid is manipulative aid.
We have to break quickly. I'm going to ask a couple of questions that are personally the most important for me. And then we can come back and get a couple of other facts. Why did you fight?
We had to fight to overthrow these rotten politicians and soldiers who were really remnants of the colonial state here. Because you see, when you talk of a man like Idi Amin, who is Idi Amin? Formed as an officer of the army. He was backward culturally, incapable of understanding human values, and yet he was left in authority in the country. And yet these were the strata to whom our friends gave power. Now, since these were obstacles to any development, we had to get rid of them. That's why we had to fight. That's why we had to fight. The first problem they had was incapacity. They were incapable of comprehending the role of organizing society. That was the first problem. Of course, then there were other problems. They were also corrupt. They were also this. But all these others came from the original one of incapacity. Because if you are not incapable, why should you kill people?
He failed with respect to what a government is supposed to do for its people.
It's not only one. It is the whole, all these strata, because it was not only one regime. There was Obote, there was Amin, but they were all of the same caliber and same type, same mentality.
Okay.
So I take them as a group, really.
Okay. Then in your
So
mind,
therefore, in short, we, the young people, whom I may regard as sort of indigenous forces, the first indigenous independent forces after many years of foreign control, who came up and started questioning the role of these groups. We wanted to get rid of these people, take power from them, so that we can use power to transform our society in the right direction.
okay. Then in your mind, for you personally, what is the role of government?
The role of government is to, it depends. In a backward country like this one, government needs to play a slightly more active role in defining issues, in giving guidance. For instance, I spend a lot of time trying to encourage our people to export. Yet in other countries, it is the private people who...
What I've seen in the priorities of the previous governments was really setting up a regime where the people in power had just a wonderful time. You know, they were in control and dominated through fear. What I'm seeing with your government is a support of the people, a bettering of Uganda. Everywhere we went, I paid very close attention during the celebration on the 26th when we were out in some small trading centers. The songs that were sung, the general attitude of the people, and I talked to many just farmers off by themselves. What do you think of this man? Is he good for the country? What is your opinion of him? And I mean, to the person, and there wasn't a rigid, fearful response. These people like you. They like what you're bringing to the country, and they seem to support you dramatically. I was very impressed with that, and that's why I was looking forward to meeting you. This is very different from some of the previous leaders. So that's why I was wondering, as a person with a military background myself, I realized that the commander's ideas generate out throughout the unit. If he's bad, the unit will be corrupt. That's why I'm asking you, what do you see as your personal role in the future of this country?
Well, as you have said, those farmers are very clever, They are very clever people.
Because they like you?
No, no, they are very clever because they are able to tell that you are honest or you are not honest. They can tell very easily. So even if there are problems, if they see that you are really serious, trying to do your best, although you may not even be succeeding, they will recognize it. So I think when you ask me the question of what is your personal role, my personal role is simply to define the problem. Like you're asking me, what is the problem in Africa? Why is there hunger? Why is there this? Now, our historical role is to define this problem clearly to the population, help them to understand our location now, where are we in the process of development? What is missing? What therefore should we do? That's our first job.
If you were to have someone look back on your administration in the future, in a few words, if you were to condense it down, what do you hope to achieve in your time as president of this country?
Well, as I have said, one is to define the role, to define the problem of Africa today, of Uganda. Now, if we define that as I think we are trying to do, as a problem of backwardness, and as a problem of backwardness in science and technology, and in management, because that is short-lived. The vehicle you have imported, when it grows old, what will you do? How will you renew it if you don't have that capacity? This is the message you are giving these people. You have problems. You don't have water in your houses. You don't have roads to your chambers because you are of backwardness in science and technology. We must solve this. Even when we import in the short run, in the medium term, an official, you misbehave in the village against the population, we punish you very, very harshly. And they see it. So they feel relaxed. They don't have to, as long as they are following the law, they don't have to bother with.
If someone were to say, President accomplished this in his time, what would those sentences say then?
They would say, he told us the importance of science and technology. That's what they would say. Because that's what we have been missing. Even that's why we have been having all these problems.
Okay, then, well, last couple of questions, sir. To this date, what are you the most satisfied with or proud of as far as your achievements have gone?
As up to date?
Yeah. If today, when you sit in the afternoon and you think,
Yes.
you know, you've been through much. You know, you've seen a lot. You've seen this country change dramatically, and in large part for your own willpower, your own beliefs, and the support of many people around you. So today, what satisfies you the most? What are you the most proud of?
I think what is most satisfactory is the fact that the Ugandans, you can produce beans for the market. You can produce oil seeds for the market. So in other words, we are now completely undermining what they used to call the subsistence sector. We still have got a lot of problems, of course, like the roads, the storage, a lot of problems. But everybody now is looking at that. But now, as of now.
Well, so then in a summary or in a word, I always like to do that at the end. From say, kind of a philosophical viewpoint, what are you the most proud of?
Well, but I wouldn't say, because it's not only one. For instance, the liberation war itself is something important. I wouldn't like to oversimplify there. For instance, the fact that people could be organized and
it does need to be along the lines of kind of a general summary. What is the goal? I'll put it a different way. What then do you see with regards to the future of Africa? Where does this continent need to go?
The future of Africa is bright. It's very bright. As I've said, this relaxation, first of all, the economic problems we had in the 70s and 80s woke up quite a number of Africans. These problems as individual countries. And in that way, it will be all right. That illusion went on for much of the 60s and part of the 70s. However, towards the end of the 70s, it was becoming very clear that, for instance, I know there are some countries which quadrupled the production of coffee and of crops like cocoa, and earning much less than they used to earn when they were producing less quantities of those commodities. So it meant, did last year, you would end up earning less. Now, that was a rude shock in terms of concepts on the part of some of these countries. As a consequence of that, there was approximately 20 countries with a combined population of 230 million people. And it's, so, but there were still some problems. I remember when we met in 1986 in the extraordinary conference we had in Burundi on this PTA, some people were